It's real. It's real. You know the deal. You know the deal. Come on.
Hey, it's Shante.
And I'm Natalie, and welcome to What's the Deal, a podcast powered by the Norfus firm. At the Norfus firm, we solve people problems, and we have the great pleasure of working with companies all around the world on human resources and diversity, equity, and inclusion issues. Well, hey there.
Hey.
How you doing?
Said it first. No, I'm good. How are you?
I was supposed to say I said it first, so maybe it was just like...
Same time. Jinx.
So this, I love this what's the deal at home thing we're doing, but maybe there's a little delay in us hearing each other because we about to fight over who was first. We're not going to fight. I won't fight, but I love you too much to fight you. So, you know, we are in unprecedented times. As we've talked about, you know, in the last episode around, you know, don't subscribe to hysteria, you know, with a lot of this anti-DEI conversation. The last 5 years have been tough, right?
Yeah. Really tough. I don't know if anyone really has sat down to really process what human beings have had to endure over these last 5 years. Like, 5 years isn't a long period of time. And then the magnitude of everything that we've had to, it's just, only by the grace of whatever you believe in, I believe in God. So only by the grace of God do I think that we even made it to this point. So
yeah,
it's been rough. It's been really, really rough.
Yeah. And I think, you know, I've said to people regularly, and now my theory is probably compounded by additional, you know, things that have happened in the world. But, you know, when I think about the pandemic and how much of a jolt that was to the workplace, between people in a day's notice constantly going into the office to having to figure out how to work from home and navigating not having a proper at-home setup to do that, and the loneliness that comes from that, and people being sick and you watching people die in these ways that you would have never seen, you know, absent in a pandemic. And so we had that, and we never paused. We never gave ourselves ways to grieve and cope with the calamity that we experienced. And we've seen that carry over into the workplace, right? And how people show up in the workplace, and this pressure cooker feeling and these short fuses. And then, as you pointed out, you know, there have been world catastrophes between natural disasters and wars that heightened. We've had crazy natural disasters here in the U.S. with these hurricanes that wiped out towns last year, right? And like the fact that people are still dealing with wiped out towns. We've been watching LA burn down this year, which is devastating, right? These all are compounding on what we were dealing with from the pandemic. And now we're dealing with political drama, right? And everything seeming like the sky is falling. So we are very much in sort of these unprecedented times that it's important to just pause and note we kind of jacked up right now.
We're kind of messed up here. We're kind of messed up. And I think it has to be acknowledged. It has to be. You can't. I don't know anyone who can really honestly say that they're okay right now.
Yeah, exactly.
And if so,
I think there are probably people who can, and those are the people who have completely retreated from the world.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But that's not the vast majority of folks. So
anyone who have to deal with this system, this American capitalistic situation, we're not okay. I don't know anyone who is.
Yeah. And that's actually a really, that's such an important point, actually, as we move into what we're going to hit on today, is as a leader, how many people have you asked if they're okay? And how many people say they are okay? We had this conversation about a month ago because we were like, gosh, there's not a single client call we get on where people are okay. There is, in any level of the small talk you have with folks when you're trying to, like, hey, hi, how you doing? There is always a snark. There's always a sniff. There's always either a direct or indirect complaint. There's always a like, oh, I'm doing my best, just trying to, and it's like, wow, that's heavy. So I think, we're always going to be concerned about the human experience. That's who we are. And so, again, when you think about these unprecedented times, are you okay? You listening? Are the people that you work with okay? And outside of the altruistic human being need for connection and that being a reason to check on people, if you're not that type of person, it does impact whether or not your work is going to get done.
Yeah, that's it. And I mean, because we all have to do a job, like that let that be the reason then to like you actually care about something or someone, please.
Exactly.
We know that everyone doesn't have it, right? Like not everyone has these can be empathetic. Not everyone has that level of emotional intelligence, right? But if we're all in a place and we've been charged with doing a job and getting a result, and if you understand that there's a connection between people's well-being and their ability to show up and just be supported and your ability to meet your objectives, let that be the reason you care, please.
Yes.
Please.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. That was a little side note, but that's an important note because, again, I know I say it a lot, but until AI or robots take over everything, you need people to do work. And if your people are not resourced appropriately in all the ways, all these beautiful goals that you take all this time to write down on a piece of paper will just be on a piece of paper.
Right. Right.
So, all right, imagine this. Imagine you're an employee at a large corporation that decided it would support its people initiatives through employee resource groups. And you decide to join, Shante, the Black Employee Resource Group. And that group was tasked with the business initiative of understanding how to better attract the Black audience to your hair care products that the company, let's just say it's a hair care product company. So this group is steadily working toward, got lots of data, driving lots of initiatives toward increasing this company's leveraging of the Black dollar, right? And there's some successes, there's some things down the pike. And you wake up one day from an email from your CEO saying that they're eliminating the company's DEI program. What's your reaction? How are you feeling about that?
My initial reaction is, what does that mean? Like when you say that you're eliminating the DEI program, what does that mean? what's the impact of that? Like, what is that? Does that mean the office of DEI? Does that mean the employee like groups, like the ERGs or business inclusion, whatever it is? Like, what does that mean? I don't know what that means. But underneath that, it's also like, oh, okay, so this is no longer important to you then, right? So what now? I guess would be my real question. What does it mean, and then what now? And how do I fit into this at this point now? Because I don't know what any of this means.
So imagine you're feeling times thousands and thousands and thousands of people with these headlines that they wake up to, or the email memos they wake up to from their CEOs that say we're rolling back our DEI programming. And so now it becomes, there's got to be, what can I do? Like, what do you do when your company hits reverse on these on talking about DEI, right? On saying we're not going to officially be talking about it, or we're not officially going to be doing it. Then what? What can you do as an employee? That's why we're here today, and a leader, right? Because we understand that leaders come in all forms, and it's not just CEOs that might be, listening in here,
right?
So why don't you walk us through some real live examples of how this sort of DEI backlash is manifesting?
You know what I think is the funniest one out of all of this, or I shouldn't say funny. It's not.
It is funny.
It's interesting. It's interesting.
Is
everyone who thought that they weren't impacted by DEI, but are actually impacted by DEI? That's the funniest one to me. It's the funniest one. I'm like, because women, particularly white women, because women of color, we know, we know, right? Veterans was an interesting one. You know, folks with disability, right? Because they don't recognize, a lot of folks don't recognize that the disability portion, although it is under the ADA, right, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and it's you know there's a statute for it and all that, but it speaks to the equity part of the DEI. So it's like these things are all related, but I think that's the funniest part is that people are shock and awe.
Yeah, like
They're being impacted.
until it affects you, it doesn't. It's meaningless. But it's
It's
funny
meaningless.
because this is why we are always willing to explain what DEI is, even though that can be frustrating because we watch all the time how people don't understand. It is not some evil thing. If you think about like I was doing a readout to a CEO and his co-founder of a startup company on sort of DEI observations that I had. And when I'd interviewed them and other senior executives before I was doing this readout. And so I was observing that their website had a DEI statement, but it didn't talk about equity. It only talked about the D and the I. And that started this very frustrating to us conversation, as you know, of, well, you know, where's the end? I want to be able to hire the best people. And we're like, I'm like, are you saying like DEI and hiring the best people don't go together? I don't understand this. But when I got into, because that's bullshit, guys. I just want to call it.
It is
Right?
wild how people make that jump. What do you do?
That's your bias showing, because if your first reaction to someone talking about DEI is, but I want to be able to hire the best people, what are you saying? You think only the best people are what? They only fall in one category? They're only white? They're only men? They're only fully able-bodied? Like, what does
Yeah, what
that
are we
mean?
saying?
What are the it is, and it shows the bias that
Mm-hmm.
people who are in positions that they didn't even necessarily earn think that we're saying go give people stuff they can't do or can't earn. Not one time in the history of my career has I've heard anyone say hire unqualified people. Like, not once. And so we could spend a whole episode on that. But really what I was getting at on that, because that shit is annoying, guys.
It's wild.
The is this idea of, okay, so you clearly don't understand equity. So when I'm going in to give the example of, hey, this is what equity looks like, I usually go to the ADA. I usually go to thinking about people with disabilities because it's such a concrete, easy way to highlight the concept. So I said, look, if you bought everybody in the company a laptop to do their work, that's equality, right? You've given everybody the same thing. But if you have someone with a vision impairment as a disability, just giving them the laptop may not help them be able to do their work because their vision is impaired. So in that case, you might have to get them a second screen that's bigger under the ADA. There might be different things an employer has to do to accommodate the disability. The response to that was, oh yeah, I mean, we would always do that. Like, that's the ADA, right? And equity. The law is trying to get at equity, guys. Like, that's why it's here.
There is such a knowledge gap. It's glaring.
Almost like cognitive dissonance.
Yeah,
It feels
like,
on purpose.
yeah. And you can't be serious. Can't be serious with this, guys. Why is it so
Right.
hard to understand? It's, to your point, it's willful at this point because these concepts are not hard. This is not hard.
They're not. And the other thing is, like, we're not saying just focus only on DEI right over here in the corner. It's a framework. It's a lens. It's how you do work, right? So anyway, the bottom line is there's clearly still a lot of misinformation, either willfully blind to certain concepts or whatever the case may be is. But as we've said from the beginning, DEI impacts everyone, every single person, right? You are in a wheelchair and need to be able to get on a plane. We watch those folks board first so that it doesn't create a whole lot of confusion, right? There's like, gosh, I could go a million examples of like everyday things that DEI impacts, which is why we're saying like it's not that deep, guys. This is not some big evil thing. You're living it every day. You don't even realize you're
Every
living.
single day. I mean, okay, so but maybe, and I know that this might be outside of where we're trying to go here, but we like to say that America is a very diverse place, right? And a lot of it is, right? But there are pockets of this country that are not. And so if we really, and we happen to live in a place that is fairly, somewhat, it's gotten better over the years, and right? And on the coast, it tends to be a lot more diverse than in the middle of the country. And so are we being a bit naive to think that people really connect with others that are different than them as often as we think they do? Because we do? Like, that's just something
Well, that's
that came up.
hey, let's talk about it. I love this because I think that if we're looking at racial diversity, probably not, right? If we think about and I think that's the dominating aspect of these types of conversations is it's about race, right? So everything zeroes in on black versus white, essentially, right? And that's the history of our country.
It's
That's
America.
started with slavery because that is largely what you were dealing with. Black folks who were enslaved and white folks who enslaved them. So that's why we end up with this black-white conversation forever and ever. So if you were to say to me, do I think people in the middle of South Dakota see a lot of racial diversity? Probably not. But diversity is more than just race. And so certainly that there is in smaller towns, you got folks with disabilities, you got folks who've served in wars, you've got folks who are different ages, you got folks who work different types of jobs, you got folks who face different types of traumas in their life, you've got folks who moved out of the small town but came back and have the perspective of the big, the small, the big. That's all diversity. So I think you'd be hard pressed to be anywhere and people not experience diversity. Even if you live in a cabin in the woods, which sounds great right now, you're seeing the different flora and fauna and what causes them to grow differently and the different colors that show up on the tree, different trees. Like, it's very difficult unless you're sitting in a facility in a straitjacket in a white room to see no diversity whatsoever in your life.
Yeah, and I think that I think it's challenging for folks to really identify those things as diverse. To your point that you were making, because this conversation tends to be couched in a certain way around like race or maybe sexual orientation or gender. So maybe those things are a little bit more glaring than the other types of understated diversity that you're highlighting. But it's just an interesting point because I'm like, it's always like what is happening? But anyway, we're talking about
No, but I think it's relevant. I think this is incredibly relevant to the topic of, well, then how do you as a leader in your company counterbalance these these pullbacks. Pullback, what the heck are they called? Rollbacks.
Rollbacks. Yep.
Lord, that was a lot of searching for rollbacks. But the point of why we wanted to talk here is we still have voices. Yes. We still have the ability. So like how you and I are sitting here really breaking it down and saying we all experience diversity, whether you understand that's what you're experiencing or not. That's why we're here to help sort of add that lens to it. Everybody wants something to be fair. You remember when you were a kid and you were like, that's not fair. And a parent would be like, but that's life. We all strive in our heart for fairness. We all want that, right? We want it to we want to feel like we've earned something because we earned it, not that you just gave it to your best friend because that was your best friend, right? That is like, again, that basic human condition.
Right.
People want to be invited to the party. People want to be like, nobody wants to be left out. Maybe they don't want to come. Maybe they'll say no, but that's the natural human desire to be included. All of us have experienced, no matter what your background is, what it feels like to be excluded. There's nothing like figuring out there's a whole separate group chat of people you thought were your friends that are planning a whole event or trip that you're not invited to, right? Like, regardless if you're like, oh, I'm fine, there's a sting when you know that there's something you are specifically excluded from. We've all experienced it, all of us.
Yes.
I was using the example the other day that when I was in elementary school, like I can vividly remember because we used to have to sit crisscross applesauce on the floor, and it was always a fight on who you got to sit next to. No, but I want to sit next to Liz. No, I want to sit next to Natalie, right? Like that whole, and then the feeling of like now you're way out here on the periphery of the friends sitting next to each other. It's just basic human emotion, right?
We're wired for connection. We're wired for connection, period.
Right.
And so when we don't get to do that, it's like we take it personally.
Yep. So on that note, you had a really cool quote from Jamie Dimon.
So, I appreciate Jamie Dimon. Jamie Dimon is the CEO of JP Morgan Chase. And hopefully, whenever he's in the news around this DEI stuff, he's a real one. Hopefully nothing happens in the future that will maybe eat those words. But up to this point, he's been really real about this. He's always stood very firm on his position here. At least in the last few times that I've read things from him in Forbes and all these other, business periodicals. But I love this quote that we found from him out of Forbes recently, where he says he's talking about how Chase is approaching DEI and what it means to their business, and he doesn't care what none of y'all are saying, which I really appreciate. He's just like, it's whatever. You're not to me, and I wish more CEOs were like this. You're not gonna tell me how to run my business. This is important to me and my business, and this is how we're going to approach it, and I don't give a damn what y'all say. And I really wish more of these leaders had that kind of backbone. His quote is, "There's nothing wrong with acknowledging and trying to bridge social and economic gaps." Period. Like, full stop. That's it. What's wrong with that? That's all we're trying to do. And then they do the work because he understands even further that this supports his bottom line. He wants more different types of people putting their money in his bank, different types of investments. I was telling Natalie the other day, I got a couple, 2, 3, 4 Chase accounts because, I appreciate him saying like, no, we want diversity. This is good for business. So yeah, I'm gonna support that. And so, it's important that people recognize that as these things are being rolled back, you got to get underneath it. You got to get to the substance of it. And you have to find those advocates. You got to use your voice.
We've been saying this about CEOs and leaders forever. And like to your point, stand on business. He's standing on business. And so when we're thinking about, let's just even start with, if you are a CEO deciding whether or not to pursue DEI or not, start with what your business needs, right? So like not the noise, because again, in our last episode, we talked about how this current set of noise is temporary. It's caught on because it's easy. It gets people going, right? But the reality is that it'll die down. And when it dies down, you have to look at your employees in the face and be confident that you made a decision that made sense for the business, which also means that it made sense for them as people. Mm-hmm. If you've already gotten past that point and you are a leader in a company that is upset or thinks it's wrong that your company has rolled back these DEI initiatives, we got 6 tips, right? Mm-hmm. And I'll say all 6, and then we'll go through them, briefly. The first is to know when and how to call out harmful practices within your company. Use industry-specific language to advocate for inclusion, which means you got to read and you got to get yourself informed on these concepts. Speak through data, not emotion, right? I'll come back to that in a second because we're going to talk about them. Engage with the business media and thought leadership platforms. Use your voice. Partner with other business leaders and other companies who share your views. Support nonprofits and policy groups behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. Now, I think a few to call out, because I think some are just obvious with the tip. Right. That I'd love for us to just talk about briefly are, which I think you're really good at knowing when and how to call out harmful practices. I'd like to focus on that and kick over to you for that. And then the speak through data and not emotion.
I mean, you have to. Gosh, it can be scary, right? Like it can be scary to speak up. It can be scary, especially if the environment. Some of us don't work in the best environments when it comes to feedback, right? Not everyone is open to feedback, but it is there. Most of these companies do have a policy around when you can call something out, how you can give feedback, how you can submit something to someone in HR, your manager, or whomever. It's that whole adage, you see something, you say something. Like you can't sit by and allow this to happen. Because again, I think that's also part of the play, right? Like if we're just constantly bombarded with all of this noise and all these things, we're going to be in this kind of like, oh my God, what do I do? And we're going to shut down, but we can't. We got to use our voice. We have to stand up for it and use the proper channels that are available to us. Again, if you don't know what they are, speaking specifically to like maybe employees, find out what they are. Talk to your manager, your HR rep. For leaders, you got to encourage people to speak up. You have to create the container for folks to want to be able to express themselves, and then what are you going to do about it, right? Like also that's a part of it too. How are you going to address these harmful practices? You have to have a plan. This is not the moment to put your head in the sand and just think
Right.
that this is just going to blow over. That's not it at all.
Right. 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 And so I do want to call out something you said, because I think it's just important to keep in mind. It can be really difficult to speak up, right? And uh, obviously, I see this all the time doing HR investigations, because you hear, but I don't want to get in trouble for this. I don't want so and so to know I said it. Because a lot of companies don't create the container for psychological safety for people to feel like they can speak up, right? That's one thing that causes people to be afraid to speak up, is they don't even think the assurances that I'm giving them that they won't be retaliated against or it's illegal to, they don't even believe that that's not even enough for them. It's not even enough for them to know they could go sue their company if the company retaliates, for them to feel comfortable speaking up, right? So that lets you know sometimes how embedded the fear and the lack of psychological safety is. And then the other reason, another reason people don't speak up is culturally, right? So some people's cultures don't invite that, irregardless of the company, right? So I've had complaints that were raised by people from India, that during the time of me interviewing them, they expressed regret for ever even raising the concern, because it was sort of like against their own culture. So we get that. If you're in the former category of a place where you're concerned about retaliation, this is a time for you to sit with yourself to ask what is most important to you. Because I would encourage you to push past that discomfort, to speak out and say what needs to be said, because we run into way too many leaders who are out of touch because they aren't getting that real feedback. So
We can't shrink. We can't shrink. We can't shrink. Everybody cannot shrink. Leaders, everybody cannot shrink. We all have to stand up and advocate and use our voice here, because otherwise, there's so much at stake.
it is
So much
exactly.
at stake. We really can't. No.
So the other one of these 6 points, and again, we'll have a slide for y'all, or an infographic that has all 6 of these tips on there. But the other one that I just want us to spend a little bit of time on is speaking through data, not emotion. Now, I'm going to give a story here. So as I've shared, I've been working on DEI since my second summer of law school, which was a long, long time ago. And I'm laughing because I was a summer associate at a law firm in Cleveland, and they at the time there was only D, right? So they had diversity committees. Like we weren't talking about equity yet, we weren't talking about inclusion yet. It was just diversity. And I remember being like, I must have been like 22, or 3, and I'm like, why would they want me on a committee? Like, I'm an intern, basically. I'm going to be here for 10 weeks, and why do they care what I think? And nobody ever said why they wanted me on, but I look around, I'm like, oh, there's no Black people here.
Right.
Like, none. Okay. But, so for me, that was my intro to it. And the other ways in which I was doing DEI along the way is a lot of counseling as a lawyer to clients and da da da. Now, anytime I got to talking about it pre-2013, which was a lot of times, I was very emotional and passionate, and it's the right thing to do. And right, because I'm very diverse in a lot of ways, and it's meaningful to me personally. And I was like, yes, we should all want this, right? Until I got to a data-driven company that looked at every single thing, no matter what it was, through a data lens. And I got my ego and heart crushed a couple times because my altruistic speeches fell flat, right? Well,
They did
don't
not
you
care.
want and don't you think and don't you care? No.
No.
I got so much further once I got into my Six Sigma problem solving training and truly understood how to use people data for storytelling. I got much, much further when I was able to use the data and took the feeling out of it. Now, this is not to say your feelings don't matter, but that's not how people make business decisions.
Right.
That's the bottom line.
Right. And I think that the feelings, I want to add that the feelings are directional. Like you get a sense, right? You understand. It's like, I get a hit that something's going on over here. I get a sense that something's going on over there. But all that is like, okay, shine the light over there. And to your point, gather the data to really understand objectively what's happening in that space. Because otherwise, I mean, folks they're not, that's just not how we're set up in this current system. Just doesn't, they don't care.
Yeah. So if we think about just the takeaways from today's episode, this is not about fighting for a program. It's about ensuring that your workforce is set up for the future. So the companies that win are the ones who stay committed to DEI, right? Because they're thinking about retention. They're thinking about their customer base. They're thinking about the fact that they want, to have innovation and the best ideas going forward. So now more than ever, DEI can give you a competitive advantage. So if we're thinking about what we are saying to you all, it's think about a DEI challenge think about a business challenge that DEI impacts. So like what this getting at does everybody see diversity, right? Mm-hmm. Like take a few minutes and pause and apply these concepts that we're saying to a challenge that you have, right? Think about folks that you can have as allies. Like one of the things we saw that I thought was super cool is find an ally in finance who can help you show the dollar value or the money you make or the money you save by focusing on DEI. And then be thoughtful of using language that resonates with your audience. So that gets at the use data, not emotion. But the bottom line of today's episode, use your voice, right? Even if your company has rolled back these policies, it does not render you unable to do nothing about it.
Correct.
All right, lots more to come. You know where to find us. Our website, thenorfusfirm.com/podcast. Instagram, What's the Deal in the Norfus Firm. Facebook, LinkedIn. We're out there for you. Click subscribe, leave us a review, tell us what you want to hear about, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.
Here it is. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and leadership. That's the deal when you know what you're dealing with.